Hello, welcome to tonight's short broadcast on data management. I'm going to try sharing slides, which I have not done before, so we'll see if I can switch back and forth between screens. But this is something that I think is a really good thing coming. It's just that implementation is a little bit rocky depending on the field. So I will jump into what I'm talking about. Let me see if I can slide share. Right. Hope everybody's well. And I'm looking at my dashboard. Oh, that doesn't tell me anything about sharing, but this might. No, that just tells me, okay. Wonder how I would share slides on here. I might have to do a non-live to share slides. What I will do then is when my kind of my backup that I'd planned. I'll probably mess around trying to share slides throughout, but mostly what I'll do is take a look at the slides on the side and just give a verbal presentation here. So the idea is that a lot of what my experience in research has been is based on the chemical and physical side of things. I did some research in chemistry and physics, and I'm currently doing some in marine biology. And so this data management is broader than that, but what I am talking about is what I've started looking into within the USA. So I do not know exactly what's going on around the world in general. But in the USA, for a long time, when I would produce research in a lab that was funded from wherever it was funded, whether it was the government federally, a state agency, or privately by a company, the data would be very non-transparent. So um, only I would have access to it and whoever I worked with. And then specifically, I would sometimes share it with other people on purpose, but it wasn't just generally available. And then, in addition to that, even if it was considered worth publishing and went into a journal to be shared with the general community within that field, the journal situation of peer-reviewed journals by other people in your own field, where you consider this research worth um, disseminating in a written form, would be that these journals are very expensive to get in a lot of cases, so they are not publicly available. What people usually do is reach them through their institution, which has a paid subscription to them. So it can be very expensive to have a paid subscription to a journal such as Science or Nature or American Chemical Society or hundreds of other journal titles. I often would look at journals with very specific targeted titles like Thin Solid Films or the Journal of American, pardon me. It's been a little while since I've looked at this one. So anyway, there are several journals out there, and a lot of even the very big ones in a certain field would be really hard to get to and to see keep up to date on general knowledge in that field. And so the US funding agencies within the federal realm are moving into trying to change that, which is great. But the method that is happening in some cases is a little rocky because not everybody knows how to follow what's in the new requirements for them to write grants and carry out a research project and have a data management plan that may not be very well described. And part of it is, of course, if you're implementing something on the fly and ongoing research, during ongoing research, nobody wants to stop research in its tracks for a new requirement. So some of the language is going to have to be Haiti. The National Science Foundation, for example, um, has so many different types of research going on that it funds that it's really hard to make one size fits all requirements for everything. There are probably some things that are more easily written for the whole community than others. So when something is written broadly, though, it can be hard to interpret. So let me get started with the my experience has been, like I said, in chemistry and physics in general, and in my experience, data sharing is really not very required. But recently, there's a huge upsurge and a really good thing, which is sharing data, some free and open journals, a lot of archives that share journal articles drafts, and so you could go search them. People are, depositing things that are going into journals that are behind a paywall, but the actual article draft before it had gotten published, but along the road to it is in an archive somewhere that they can find for free. It's open source. So there's some really good things that that allows, and including collaboration among communities, because not everywhere is going to have access to everything. But if it's open, then people can actually work with each other. So part of what happens in my experience is that sharing data has barriers that include cost because it actually does cost money to store things and have a lot of points of entry into it for just anyone. Um, Language, because of course each field has its own terminology, so that can be a barrier to sharing. And then habits. So people are used to what they're used to, and if they weren't sharing before, it's harder to change and share now. And so all of those make for difficulties. So I'm going to try again to share a screen just because even though it's very simple, I like this picture. And let me see if I can do it. Hmm, nope, that is not the way. Hmm, let's click on these three bars. Nope, that's not the way either. Hmm, I thought that there would be a way to do this. Interesting. But you know what? I will keep going and finish out this thought, and I will do a little bit of homework ahead of time on sharing slides. I thought it would be an obvious button. So in my own group, back when I was getting a lot of research in chemistry done, we didn't really have um, a lot of discussion on this, but a little bit. We would share with our collaborators, and in certain cases, we would share data with people. We weren't particularly closed up either, but we did have some work that we did for that was funded by companies and private industries. So some of that needed to be not just public information, and that is a really good reason to keep in mind that not everything is shareable. But in general, if something's funded by the federal government for the public good, having it locked up behind a paywall has been a major irritation for a long time. Why would this publicly funded information that everybody wants to get out there that's working on it then be hidden in this system where there is no choice but to submit it to a journal that costs a lot of money for everyone? So the recent increase in computer storage is really wonderful. And the recent increase in interest and actually the will, this has long been building. People have been pushing for this, but the recent actual um, coming to fruition of policies that require sharing is really good. It's just that, again, it's not always easy to know what language to use exactly and what systems to use exactly. And every field is a little different. Before the requirement, there are some fields that did a really good job of thinking ahead and setting up banks for data. There's actually a protein data bank requirement for research already in the field where people are getting crystal structures and other kinds of very hard to determine and really valuable protein structures. And they're getting banked because it's actually required and it has been for years. And people are doing all kinds of projects with this where they can actually send out this data to um, anyone who wants to access it with certain requirements met, and they can figure out the structures of other proteins based on known proteins. And so I will actually link that website below, the Protein Data Bank. It's wonderful, and it has led to all kinds of opening up of protein structures and other structures. Um, for years, the NASA and many astronomer groups have been open with each other and open to the public. So shared data within all kinds of the astronomy and space and NASA agencies is excellent. And NASA doesn't just do outside the atmosphere, it does a lot of monitoring of the Earth itself, which is really fantastic data and has led to all kinds of good discoveries. So there are distributed active archive centers, which include the Atmospheric Science Data Center, the Goddard Earth Sciences Data and Information Services Center, the National Snow and Ice Data Center. Because with the kind of data collected, it's so wonderful that they thought ahead to say, this is a worldwide um, relevant information and it shouldn't be hidden. And so it isn't. Even before any kind of recent advances in some of the other fields, astronomy has been sharing worldwide in a wonderful way, in a really logical way for a long time. And it has led to some really fantastic things. So, with this multi agency data sharing, for example, I could find a press release that, again, I'll link since I'm not showing any slides, but maybe that's even better anyway. That after looking at 15 years of radio data, people are finding evidence of slow rolling gravity waves. And can you imagine? Uh, Radio waves are the longer in space ones, and being able to look at them in time and space over the span of years of archive data has allowed people to actually see what might be gravity. That's fantastic. And that's not something that would be possible if that data was all sealed up somewhere in one or two random labs. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to go through something that was collected over time for all kinds of reasons and pull out whatever the question was and see what the data is showing over decades, if potentially. So, NSF, the National Science Foundation, NIH, the National Institute of Health, are encouraging sharing. Um, there are privacy concerns if there are human subjects. There are IP concerns if the research is going to certain places. But in general, if the data can be shared and there's no reason against it, then people are having to actually develop data management plans and file them with the government or their funding agency and think about this. And so I recently have been working on a marine science project, which is out of my field, but I've kindly been invited by my marine biology professor into his lab. um, we talked about who would want to see this data and why. And when we publish it, I have recently noticed that many, many articles that used to be behind paywalls or totally inaccessible to a general person that didn't have a big institutional college, company, research institute library that had the access for them, still sometimes can get hold of these articles, whereas before it would be impossible. So these conversations are ongoing and will allow all kinds of more collaboration between fields when in a lot of cases is where a lot of exciting things happen, and within fields where, of course, always good things are happening. So communication and consulting are increasing. This is really good news. There are a lot of questions that are still to be figured out on the fly by groups that don't have a lot of details on how to implement a good data management plan. So hopefully, what will happen more and more is that there will be some coordinated efforts, and people are already doing behind the scenes more than I know, I would think, to get together more sound rules, ground rules, and thinking up good standards for data storage. And I wanted to say, hopefully, this was of interest. It was very general. No slides were shared. I will link a couple of things after the fact, and thank you.